Hello chess lovers, we are going to be looking at another game from FIDE World Cup 2021. So this is a position from the game between Krasenkow and Alekseenko from round 2 of FIDE World Cup. So don't worry if this round was played a few days ago, because this is something to see. This is something really extraordinary. So let's talk about the position. So right now the material is equal, same number of pawns, same number of pieces. White has a nice knight on d6, but it is undermined. Yeah, there is a tension between these two pawns, and if the e5 pawn disappears, then the d6 knight will be in trouble. Also interesting is that there is a rook on king side. Very strange position of the rook. On the other hand, black's queen is a little bit far away from its king. So that was maybe an inspiration for the next move. So look at this move. Rook takes h6, sacrificing a rook. This was taken, and now queen h6. So queen is very close to the king, and the king doesn't have many defenders. For example, if you try to bring the rook into defense, rook g7, then after ef6, black is just lost. He's a rook up, but he's just lost. There is a threat here, so if you move the rook back, we can give a check, and after king here, we can go to e4, making a battery. So if you take, there is a checkmate. Also, there is a threat to cut the connection between this rook and the h7 square, so this position would be lost. That's why black Alekseenko played a good move, queen c7. So what's the point of this move? So queen is aiding the defense of black king. So white took another pawn, and now let's count. So there are 4 pawns for a rook. So that's really not an equal balance, but there is an attack. So with correct defense, white should not be able to win, but also he should not lose. So the position should end up in a draw. But let's see what happened in a game. So this bishop is hanging, so it moved and it attacked a rook. But did Krasenkow defend his rook? No! He played an attacking move, bishop h3. So if you take the rook, bishop comes into attack, and after king h7, knight f5, the bishop is cutting this exit route, the knight is controlling these two squares, and there is no defense to this checkmate. No sensible defense. You can give up the queen by placing the rook here, but yeah, so that's a checkmate. Okay, so that's why the rook cannot be captured. Black played a good move, rook f8, attacking the queen, aiding the defense. Bishop e6 check, the bishops were exchanged, and now let's say you might think, oh, I have an extra rook as black. Maybe I can give some material back like this, and then I will have an extra piece. But this would be a lost position. So here black has a knight for 4 pawns. I mean, white has 4 pawns against the knight, and these pawns, actually 3, because there is an extra pawn on the queen side, but these 4 pawns, they are unstoppable. So this would be a lost position. Also, white does not need to capture immediately. He can continue the attack, and he can always enter this favorable winning endgame. So this is not an option. You have to move the king. So king went to the side, queen h6 check, and now this is a double attack. So you cannot block with a rook, because then you get checkmated. so black needs to protect this rook. So king g8. And what's the logical move? Bring the last piece into the attack. So rook d4 with these intentions, yeah, or these intentions. But here black can hold because he has a queen and a rook on the 7th rank, so he can protect along the 7th rank. For example, he can play rook h7, or he can play rook g7, and if white tries to go here, then he can go rook h7. And this would be a balanced position. Probably it would end up in a repetition. For example, here, 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 and we would have a draw, most probably. But black tried to bring this knight into defense, but that was not good. So by playing here, he thought, okay, my pieces are covering these squares, which is true. In the previous variation, that defense worked. But let's imagine that instead of giving checks, because if you give check, black has this, yeah, so no progress. But let's imagine that white somehow controls this square first and then does the same thing. Then you could not block. It would not be possible. So this is what he does. He first gives a check. King goes to h8, and now a wonderful move, knight e8, attacking the queen and controlling the g7 square. So when we repeat all the previous moves, there will be no rook g7. Look, first the queen is hanging, yeah, so you have to do something. So queen moved, and now queen h6 check. Again, you cannot block because you get mated. So king g8, rook g4 check, and now because the knight is controlling this square and the queen is no longer supporting, there is no rook g7. So the king has to go forward, and this is where the king meets his end. After knight d6 check, Alekseenko resigned. So why did he resign? If you move the king, there is only one square, and then you get checkmated like this. That's a checkmate. If you capture the knight, if you capture the knight, it's also forced checkmate after rook g7, king e8, nice little move, queen h5. Black can only interpose, but the queen will pick up both of these rooks and deliver finally checkmate on f7. So that's why after knight d6, Alekseenko resigned. That was a beautiful attack conducted by Krasenkow. He's a little bit old guy. I think he's over 50. Actually, a few rounds later, he was knocked out by Pragnananda, but I still believe that this was a very instructional attack and very inspiring play by the old grandmaster. I hope you enjoyed this masterpiece, and see you in the next video.